Commander Threk Malvorn had served the Threll Dominion for 31 years, and in all that time, he had never seen a single ship cross the border alone. It was against every rule of war. It was against every rule of common sense. No captain, human or alien, sent one ship into enemy territory without support. A single ship meant no backup, no second chance, no way to call for help fast enough to matter. Yet there it was, glowing on the sensor screen of the border station Yultharak. One ship, human make, moving slowly and calmly through Threll space, as if it had every right to be there. "Say that again," Malvorn said. He did not raise his voice. He rarely did. But the officer at the sensor station, a young Threll named Dessa Korin, could hear the edge in it anyway. "One vessel, sir. Human design. It crossed the border marker at 0600 hours, ship time. No weapons fire. No cloaking. No evasive movement. It's just flying in a straight line." "Toward what?" Dessa checked her readout again. Her 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit she had never managed to break. "Toward the inner systems, sir. Toward Threlka itself, if it holds this course. Threlka, the capital world, home to 12 billion Threll, the seat of the Dominion government, and the most heavily defended planet in the entire empire. If this human ship intended to reach it, that ship would die a long way before it ever saw Threlka's sun." Malvorn folded his 4 hands behind his back and studied the screen. The human ship's outline was small, sleek, built for speed rather than combat, from what the scanners could tell. No visible weapon ports larger than point defense turrets. This was not a warship meant to fight a war. This was something else. "Options," Malvorn said. "We could scramble a wing of interceptors from Yultharak," said Dessa. "We could hail them and demand they turn back. We could—" "Hail them first," Malvorn said. "I want to know what a human thinks they're doing, flying into a nest of 100 million angry aliens by themselves." The hail went out on all standard frequencies, human and Threll both. It took 11 seconds for the reply to come back, which by Threll military standards was fast. Too fast, in fact. It was as if the humans had been expecting the call and had a response ready before they were even asked. The voice that came through was calm, almost bored. "Threll Border Station. This is the UNS Quiet Reach. We hear you. We are not here to attack anyone. We are exploring." Dessa's eyes went wide. "Exploring, sir. They said they're exploring." "Exploring," Malvorn repeated. He did not believe it for a moment, but he was curious enough to ask. He leaned toward the comm panel himself. "This is Commander Threk Malvorn, of the Threll Dominion. You are currently violating the sovereign border of our territory. Turn your vessel around immediately, or we will be forced to treat you as a hostile intruder." There was a pause. Then the human voice came back, and Malvorn thought he could hear something like amusement in it, though it was hard to tell with humans. Their voices did strange things when they were not afraid. "Commander Malvorn, I understand your position, but I'm going to keep going for now. If your ships want to stop me, you're welcome to try. I promise I won't shoot first." The channel went quiet. Malvorn stood very still for a long moment. Then he turned to Dessa. "Get me fleet command. Now." 3 hours later, the picture had not improved. If anything, it had gotten stranger. The human ship, the Quiet Reach, continued on its slow, steady path through Threll space. It did not speed up. It did not slow down. It ignored 3 separate demands to stop. When a squadron of 6 Threll interceptors was finally scrambled to intercept it, the Quiet Reach did something that made every officer on the bridge of Yultharak Station go silent. It stopped moving entirely. Just sat there, engines idling, in open space, and waited for the interceptors to arrive. "They've stopped," Dessa reported, her voice tight. "They're just floating there. Weapons are cold, shields are up, but at minimum strength. They're not even trying to run." Malvorn watched the tactical display. 6 armed Threll fighters, closing on 1 unarmed-looking human scout ship. This should have been simple. This should have been over in minutes, one way or another. "Squadron leader, report your status," Malvorn said into the comm. The reply came back from flight leader Yasik Tor, a veteran of 4 border skirmishes. "Commander, we have visual on the target. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. Orders?" Malvorn thought for a moment. Every instinct told him this was a trap. No sane commander sent an unarmed ship deep into enemy space and then let it sit still in front of an armed squadron unless there was something else going on. But he had also been given direct orders from Fleet Command: identify the intruder's purpose, and if possible, capture the vessel intact. The Dominion scientists were desperate to get their hands on any piece of human technology they could find. Human ships were rare in Threll space, and human prisoners rarer still. Approach with caution, Malvorn ordered. Attempt to hail them again. If they show any sign of hostile action, you are cleared to fire. Understood, Commander. The 6 fighters closed the distance, arranging themselves in a loose ring around the quiet reach. On the comm channel, Tor's voice came through, tense but professional. Human vessel, this is Threll Flight Leader, Yasik Tor. You are surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. There was a pause. Then the same calm human voice answered, the one Malvorn had spoken to hours before. Flight Leader Tor, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to decline the boarding part. As for powering down, sure, why not? To everyone's shock, the Quiet Reach's engine signature dropped to near zero. The ship went dark and drifted, completely still, completely undefended. They've powered down, Tor reported, disbelief clear in his voice. Commander, they've actually done it. They're just sitting here. Malvorn frowned at the screen. This made no sense. A ship that flew calmly into enemy territory, ignored every warning, and then simply surrendered its only advantage, its movement, the moment it was asked? Either the human captain was a fool, or Malvorn was missing something important. Board them, Malvorn said slowly, carefully. 2 fighters hold position as guard. The rest? Prepare a boarding party. What the boarding party found when they cut through the airlock of the Quiet Reach was almost more confusing than the ship's behavior had been. The ship was small, built for a crew of perhaps 6, though the boarding team only found 1 human aboard. She was a woman, dark-haired, standing calmly in the middle of the main corridor, with her hands open at her sides, showing she carried no weapon. Captain Elena Voss, she said, before any of the Threll soldiers could speak. I figured you'd want to know who you're talking to. The lead soldier, a young Threll named Backer Sill, kept his weapon raised. Where is the rest of your crew? It's just me, Voss said. 1 pilot, 1 ship. That's all you're getting today. Bakar exchanged a look with the soldier beside him. This was not what they had expected. Every training simulation, every intelligence briefing about human vessels assumed multiple crew, backup systems, hidden defenses. A single human alone, on an unarmed scout ship, deep in enemy territory, calmly waiting to be captured, fit no pattern they had ever studied. Why are you here? Bakar asked. Voss smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even the seasoned soldier feel a chill down his spine, though he could not have said why. Curiosity, she said simply. We wanted to see how you'd react. React to what? To one of us showing up alone. Bakar did not like that answer. He liked it less the longer he thought about it. You're under arrest. You'll be taken to Yulthurak Station for questioning. Sure, Voss said, and held out her wrists as if for restraints, still smiling that same calm smile. Take me wherever you like. I've got nowhere else to be today. Back on Yulthurak Station, Commander Malvorn watched the report come in, with a growing sense of unease that he could not fully explain. A human captain, alone, offering no resistance, giving up her ship and her freedom without a fight. It was too easy. Everything about this was too easy, and 31 years of service had taught Malvorn that when something was too easy, it usually meant the real danger was somewhere he could not yet see. He requested a private channel to Fleet Command and got Grand Admiral Senna Threllkor herself, the commander of the entire Threll 3rd Battle Fleet, which was currently stationed 2 systems away, ready to respond to any major threat along the border. Report, Threllkor said. Her voice was sharp, used to being obeyed instantly. Malvorn laid out everything: the single ship, its slow entry into Threll space, its refusal to run, its surrender, and now the captured human captain being brought in for questioning. He kept his tone level, professional, but he could not hide the strange feeling sitting in his chest. You think this is a trap, Threllkor said when he finished. It was not a question. I don't know what it is, Admiral, but I don't like it. A human ship does not fly this deep into our territory just to get captured. There has to be a reason. Threlkor was quiet for a moment. Malvorn could hear the soft hum of the fleet's command deck behind her voice, the sound of 100 officers working at their stations, of an armada of 40 warships sitting ready and waiting. "I'll bring the fleet closer to the border," Threlkor said finally. "If this is some kind of human trick, I want the 3rd Battle Fleet in position to answer it. In the meantime, get whatever information you can out of this captain. I want to know what the humans are planning." "Yes, Admiral." The channel closed. Malvorn stood alone on the bridge of Yultharak Station, looking out at the stars, at the quiet dark where, somewhere, a single human ship had just handed itself over without a fight. He thought again of Captain Voss's smile, the calm certainty in her voice. "We wanted to see how you'd react." React to what, exactly? Malvorn did not know, but some old soldier's instinct, buried deep in his gut, told him that whatever the humans were planning, they had already gotten their answer. And the game, whatever it was, had only just begun. 3 days. That was how long it would take before the Threll Dominion understood exactly what kind of trap they had walked into. But on this first day, as the sun set over a dozen worlds across the Dominion, and Captain Elena Voss sat calmly in a holding cell, humming quietly to herself, Commander Malvorn only knew one thing for certain. Something was very, very wrong, and there was no way to stop it now. Word of the strange incident spread quickly through the small crew stationed at Yultharak. It was not a large post, only a few hundred Threll assigned to watch a quiet stretch of border that had, until now, seen little more than the occasional smuggler or lost trading ship. Most of the young officers had joined expecting a boring assignment far from any real danger. None of them had expected to be the first to witness a human ship crossing into Dominion space alone. In the mess hall that evening, the talk was of nothing else. "My cousin flew escort during the last border skirmish with the Katrasi," said a young technician named Orin Vask, leaning across the table toward 2 others, who were only half listening as they ate. "He said humans always fight in pairs, at least. Never alone. It's practically part of their training, from what our intelligence reports say. So why would one of their captains just fly in here by herself?" "Maybe she got lost," offered another technician, a woman named Bree Tallis, though she did not sound like she believed it herself. "Nobody gets that lost," Orin said. "Not flying a ship with navigation systems better than half our fleets. No, there's something else going on. I heard Commander Malvorn himself went down to question her twice already." "Everybody's heard that," Bree said. "The question is what she told him." Nobody at the table had an answer, and the conversation drifted, as it often did among worried people with too little information, toward speculation that grew wilder with every retelling. By the time the story had passed through 3 more tables, the single unarmed scout ship had become, in some versions, a warship in disguise, and Captain Voss herself had become, depending on who was telling it, either a spy, an assassin, or the first wave of a full invasion force. Commander Malvorn heard some of these rumors secondhand from his junior officers and did nothing to correct them, mostly because he was not entirely certain any of them were wrong. He had learned, over 3 decades of service, that when soldiers began telling frightened stories to fill in the gaps of what they did not know, it was usually because their commanders had failed to give them the truth. The trouble, in this case, was that Malvorn did not have the truth himself. He had a single human ship, a calm captain who admitted almost nothing, and a growing unease in his gut that told him this was only the beginning of something much larger. Later that night, unable to sleep, Malvorn returned to the small observation deck near the top of Yultharak Station, a quiet room used mostly for maintenance checks on the station's outer sensor arrays. He liked to come here when his mind was too full to rest, to look out at the stars and let the silence settle his thoughts. Tonight, the stars gave him no comfort. He thought back over every detail of the day, the quiet reach, entering Threll space at a slow, deliberate pace, as if its pilot wanted to be seen clearly and without confusion, the refusal to run when challenged. The strange, total surrender the moment 6 armed fighters closed in, and Voss herself, calm in a way that Malvorn had never once seen from a genuine prisoner of war. He had interrogated enough captured pirates and smugglers over the years to know what fear looked like on an alien face, human or otherwise. Fear made most beings talk too much, offering excuses and explanations nobody had asked for, trying to bargain their way out of trouble before the trouble had even been named. Voss had done none of that. She had answered exactly what was asked, no more, no less, with the patience of someone who already knew how the conversation was going to end. "We wanted to see how you'd react," she had said. Malvorn turned the phrase over again and again in his mind, searching for the meaning hidden beneath it. If the humans had wanted to test the Dominion's border defenses, there were far easier and safer ways to do it. Long-range sensor drones. Passive surveillance from the edge of Threll space. A dozen quiet methods that would have given them useful information, without risking a captain and a ship. Instead, they had chosen the loudest, most visible option available. A single ship, flying openly into the heart of Dominion territory, practically daring someone to stop it. That was not the behavior of a species testing sensor ranges. That was the behavior of a species testing something else entirely. Reactions, decisions, the choices that Threll commanders would make once they discovered a human ship inside their borders. Malvorn did not like where that thought led him. If the humans were studying Threll decision-making, it meant they cared very much about what the Dominion would do next. And a species that cared that much about predicting another's next move was, almost by definition, planning something that depended on that prediction being correct. Early the next morning, before most of the station had woken for the day's duties, Malvorn received an encrypted message from a contact he had cultivated for years in the Dominion's intelligence division, a cautious old officer named Threll, named Vorik Hass, who owed Malvorn a favor from a border incident many years before. The message was short: movement reported near the outer trade lanes, 3 systems from your position, unconfirmed, possibly nothing, thought you should know, given recent events. Malvorn read it twice, then called Hass directly on a secure line. "What kind of movement?" Malvorn asked, without bothering with pleasantries. "Unclear," Hass admitted, his voice thin and cautious even through the encrypted channel. "A cargo captain, running the outer lanes, reported unusual readings, gravitational distortions, that didn't match any known ship or natural phenomenon. He assumed it was sensor error and didn't think much of it until word came down about your human visitor. Now half the intelligence office is wondering if the 2 events are connected." "Are they?" "I don't know, Threk. That's the honest truth. It could be nothing. Traders imagine all sorts of things out on those long, empty lanes. But given the timing, I thought you'd want to know before the official report even reaches Fleet Command." Malvorn thanked him and ended the call, sitting alone in his quarters as the weight of the information settled over him. Gravitational distortions, the kind of readings that might, in theory, be caused by very large ships moving with advanced stealth technology, if such technology existed, and if the readings were not simply sensor error or an overactive trader's imagination. He thought of Voss again, of her calm words the night before. "We wanted to see how you'd react." Perhaps, Malvorn thought grimly, they already knew. By mid-morning, Fleet Command had ordered Malvorn to prepare a full report on the incident for review by senior military leadership, including any and all information gathered from the prisoner. Malvorn compiled what little he had, careful to include his own private doubts alongside the official facts, though he suspected few of his superiors would give those doubts much weight. Doubt was not something Threll commanders were rewarded for expressing, not when confidence and decisive action were what climbed a career forward. Still, he included a final note at the bottom of his report, one he hoped someone further up the chain would actually read. "Recommend caution. The behavior of the captured vessel and its pilot does not match known patterns of human military doctrine. It is my assessment that this incident may represent a deliberate provocation designed to draw a larger Dominion response. I recommend against escalating our military presence at this border until the true purpose of this incursion is better understood." He sent the report before he could second-guess himself further, then sat back in his chair and waited, staring at the star charts on his wall, wondering if anyone would listen. Somewhere far above the station, in the cold quiet of open space, the quiet Reach sat impounded in Yultharak's small docking bay, dark and silent, its true purpose already served. And somewhere much farther away, beyond the reach of any Threll sensor, the true weight of humanity's plan continued moving into position, patient and unseen, exactly as it had been designed to do from the very beginning. Malvorn did not know it yet, but his careful, cautious report would arrive on Grand Admiral Threlkor's desk at almost the exact same moment she made the decision to move her entire fleet to the border. By the time she read his warning, the order had already been given, and the largest armada the Dominion had ever assembled was already underway, sailing directly toward the trap that Malvorn's instincts had tried, and failed, to warn her away from. The holding cell on Yultharak Station was small, gray, and built to make prisoners feel small along with it. Captain Elena Voss sat on the narrow bench against the wall, hands folded in her lap, and looked entirely unbothered by any of it. Commander Malvorn stood on the other side of the transparent barrier, watching her for a long moment before he spoke. He had interrogated prisoners before. Pirates, smugglers, even a few captured soldiers from the short border war with the Katrasi Union a decade ago. All of them had shown some kind of fear, anger, defiance, something. Voss showed nothing but a calm, faint curiosity, as if she were the one studying him. "You don't seem very worried, Captain Voss," Malvorn said. "Should I be?" she asked. "You are a prisoner of the Threll Dominion, alone, deep inside our territory, with no way to call for help and no way to escape. Most beings in your position would be afraid." Voss tilted her head slightly. "Are you going to hurt me, Commander?" "That depends on how cooperative you are." "I'm being very cooperative," she said. "I answered your hail. I stopped my ship. I let your men board without a fight. I'm sitting here talking to you right now instead of causing trouble. I'd say that's pretty cooperative." Malvorn had to admit, privately, that she had a point. He tried a different approach. "Why did you come here, Captain, truthfully?" "I told your officer already. Curiosity." "That is not a real answer." Voss shrugged. "It's the truth, though. Humanity has been at peace with the Threll Dominion for 6 years now. No wars, no serious incidents, just the usual border tension and the occasional angry speech from your politicians about how dangerous we are. I wanted to see what would actually happen if one of us crossed the line. Would you shoot first and ask questions later? Would you try to talk? Would you panic?" She smiled again, that same calm, unreadable smile. "Turns out, you did none of those things. You captured me and put me in a cell to ask me questions. That's useful information." "Useful for what?" "For understanding you," Voss said simply. Malvorn studied her face, looking for some crack in that calm surface, some sign of the lie he was certain must be there. He found nothing. "You expect me to believe you flew a ship alone into hostile territory, risking capture, torture, or death, simply to satisfy your curiosity about how we would react?" "I expect you to believe whatever you want, Commander," Voss said. "But that is the truth. Humans are curious creatures. Sometimes that curiosity gets the better of us." There was something underneath her words that Malvorn could not quite place. Not a lie, exactly, but not the whole truth either. He had the strange sense that Voss was telling him something true and, at the same time, hiding something enormous behind it, the way a person might mention the weather while standing in front of a burning building. "I will be recommending that you remain in Dominion custody until Fleet Command determines what to do with you," Malvorn said finally. "That's fine," Voss said. "Take your time." She did not seem worried at all. And that, more than anything else, was what kept Malvorn awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his small quarters aboard Yultharak Station, turning her words over and over in his mind. I wanted to see what would actually happen. What would actually happen, not what did happen. As if she were still waiting for something else to unfold. 200,000 kilometers away, aboard the flagship of the Threll 3rd Battle Fleet, Grand Admiral Senna Threlkor stood on her command deck and looked at a star map that stretched from wall to wall, showing every system along the human Threll border. 40 warships, that was the strength of the 3rd Battle Fleet, the largest standing military force in the Dominion, built and maintained specifically to deter human aggression after the tense years following first contact. Cruisers, destroyers, a handful of massive battleships, and the flagship itself, the Threlka's Glory, a vessel so large it could have swallowed the human scout ship whole with room to spare. Threlkor had commanded this fleet for 9 years. She had never lost a ship in battle, because she had never needed to fight one. The mere presence of the 3rd Battle Fleet, sitting near the border, ready to move at a moment's notice, had been enough to keep the peace all this time. Now, for the first time in those 9 years, She found herself facing a situation she did not fully understand. "Talk to me," she said to her intelligence officer, a sharp-minded Threll named Corvin Elth. "What do we know?" "Very little, Admiral," Elth admitted. "The human vessel, the Quiet Reach, entered our space 18 hours ago, alone, unarmed for practical purposes, and allowed itself to be captured without resistance. Its captain, a woman named Elena Voss, claims she was acting out of curiosity, with no larger military purpose. Do you believe that?" Elth hesitated. "No, Admiral, I don't." "Neither do I." Threlkor looked back at the star map, at the glowing lines that marked the border, and at the small red dot that marked Yultharak Station, where the captured human ship now sat. "The humans do not do things without reason. Every report we have on their military culture says the same thing. They plan, they calculate. They do not send ships on pointless missions of curiosity into the territory of a species they have called, in their own words, unpredictable and heavily armed. There is a purpose here that we are not seeing." "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Threlkor thought for a long moment. She had two choices, as she saw them. She could pull the fleet back, treat the incident as a minor border violation, hold the captain for questioning, and eventually return her to human space as a gesture of continued peace. Cautious, safe, the kind of decision that would keep everyone comfortable. Or she could move the fleet forward, closer to the border, and use this strange event as an opportunity to send a message of her own. A message that said the Threll Dominion would not be tested. That any human incursion, however small, however strange, would be met with overwhelming strength. "Move the fleet to the border," Threlkor said. "All 40 ships. I want us in position near Yultharak within 6 hours." "Admiral, that is a significant show of force for a single captured scout ship." "It is exactly the show of force this situation calls for," Threlkor said. "If the humans are testing us, as I suspect, then I intend for them to see exactly what happens when they do. Our full fleet, on their doorstep, ready to respond to anything they try next." Elth saluted, and turned to relay the order. Behind him, the great engines of the Threlka's glory began to hum with power, as the largest fleet in the Dominion's history prepared to move. On the human side of the border, in a quiet command room aboard a vessel that no Threll sensor had yet detected, a small group of officers watched the same star map that Admiral Threlkor studied, though from a very different angle. "They're moving," said one officer, a lean man named Rios, watching the sensor feed update in real time. "The whole third battle fleet, 40 ships, heading for the border near Yultharak Station." Beside him, a woman in an admiral's uniform, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Her name was Fleet Admiral Renata Cole, and she had spent the last 3 years of her career planning for exactly this moment. "Good," Cole said, "exactly as we hoped." "They took the bait faster than we expected," Rios said. "Voss barely had to do anything. Look calm." "Voss is good at her job," Cole said. She knew the Threll would misread her calm as confidence, which would make them nervous, which would make them want to show strength instead of caution. Aggressive species like the Threll can't help themselves when they think someone is testing them. They have to answer with force. It's built into how they think. "And now they're moving their entire border fleet 40 ships into position, right where we want them," said another officer, a younger woman named Aisha Patel, watching a second display that showed a very different set of markers, quiet and unmoving, scattered across 3 neighboring systems. "Right where we want them," Cole agreed. "When do we move?" Rios asked. Cole looked at the timer running quietly in the corner of the main screen. It had started the moment the Quiet Reach crossed the border, 18 hours ago now. "We give it time," she said. "Let them settle into position. Let them get comfortable. Let Admiral Threlkor feel like she's made the right decision, moving her fleet up to intimidate a single captured pilot. The longer they sit there feeling strong, the less they'll expect what happens next." "And Voss?" Patel asked. "She's still sitting in a cell over there." "She knew the risk when she volunteered," Cole said, and there was no coldness in her voice, only quiet respect. "She also knows we're not going to leave her behind. Part 3 of this plan does not work unless we get her out, and we will, but not yet. Right now, the only thing that matters is getting that fleet exactly where we need it, and keeping them there long enough." She turned back to the star map, to the 40 little markers moving steadily toward Yultharak Station. toward a trap they could not yet see, and would not understand, until it was far too late. 3 days, Cole said quietly, almost to herself. That's all we need. By the time the third battle fleet arrived at Yulthurak Station, the mood among the Threll crews had shifted from tension to something closer to grim confidence. 40 warships, arranged in a wide defensive formation around the border station, made for an impressive sight. Officers who had been nervous about the strange human incursion now walked the corridors of their ships with straighter backs, reassured by the sheer scale of the force gathered around them. Admiral Threllcore toured the command deck of the Threlka's Glory, watching her crews work with renewed confidence, and allowed herself to feel, for the first time since the incident began, that she had made the correct decision. Status report, she said to Elth. All 40 ships in position, Admiral. Sensor net fully deployed across 3 systems. If anything larger than a shuttle tries to cross this border, we will know within seconds. Good, Threllcore said. And the prisoner? Still in custody at Yulthurak, Admiral. Commander Malvorn reports she remains cooperative, but has offered no new information. Threllcore nodded slowly, looking out at the star field beyond the viewport, at the quiet dark where, somewhere far beyond her sensors, humanity's true intentions still waited, unseen. Keep the fleet in position, she said. We wait, and we watch. If the humans intended this as some kind of test, let them see exactly how the Threll Dominion answers a test. With strength, with unity, with every ship we have. She did not know, as she said those words, standing proud on the command deck of her flagship, surrounded by the largest and most powerful fleet the Dominion had ever assembled in one place, that she had just done exactly what Fleet Admiral Renata Cole, 2 systems away, had been hoping she would do all along. 40 ships, 1 place, 3 days. The trap had already closed. Nobody on the Threll side had noticed yet. Malvorn's report reached Grand Admiral Threllcore 2 hours after she had already given the order to move the fleet. He learned this only when Elth, acting on Threllcore's own instructions, sent back a short and somewhat dismissive reply, thanking him for his diligence, but noting that the Admiral's decision had already been made and would not be revisited without stronger evidence. Malvorn read the reply 3 times, sitting alone at his desk aboard Yulthurak Station, and felt something heavy settle in his chest. He had done what he could. He had put his doubts on record, clearly and formally, in the only way a career officer could, without risking outright insubordination. It had not been enough. He thought about pressing the issue further, perhaps requesting a direct conversation with Threllcore herself, but he knew how that would look. A border station commander, second-guessing the strategic judgment of a Grand Admiral, with 9 years of unbroken command experience, based on nothing more than a prisoner's calm demeanor, and a trader's unconfirmed sensor readings. It would read as exactly the kind of nervous, unfounded caution that ambitious officers were taught to avoid. So instead, Malvorn did the only thing left within his power. He kept watching, he kept listening, and he made sure that every scrap of information that passed through Yulthurak Station, no matter how small, made its way up the chain of command as quickly as his authority allowed. Aboard the Quiet Reach, still sitting impounded in the station's small docking bay, a team of Dominion engineers worked carefully to study the ship's systems, hoping to learn something useful about human technology. What they found only deepened the mystery surrounding the whole affair. It's clean, reported the lead engineer, a meticulous older Threll named Chorus Embeth, standing before Malvorn with a datapad full of readings. Too clean, if you ask me, Commander. No weapons beyond basic point defense systems. No hidden compartments. No advanced sensor equipment beyond what any standard scout ship would carry. If I didn't know better, I'd say this ship was built for nothing more than short survey missions. Then why send it here, alone, into our territory? Malvorn asked. That, Commander, is not a question my engineering team can answer, Chorus said. But I will tell you this. Whatever this ship was built to do, it was not built to fight. And it was certainly not built to survive an extended engagement inside hostile space. If Captain Voss knew she might be captured, and I believe she did, then she also knew this ship offered her no way to escape or resist. She came here fully expecting to be caught. Malvorn considered this carefully. A ship built only to be caught. A captain who expected, perhaps even wanted, to be captured. It fit with everything else he had observed, and it painted a picture he liked less, with every new detail. This had never been about the ship at all. It had never truly been about Voss either, except as a piece moved carefully into place. The real purpose of this entire incident lay somewhere else, somewhere Malvorn still could not see. 3 systems away, as the third battle fleet drew closer to the border near Yoltharak, Grand Admiral Threlkor held a private meeting with her senior staff aboard the Threlka's Glory, laying out her reasoning for the deployment, in terms she hoped would settle any lingering doubts among her officers. "I understand the concerns some of you have raised," she said, looking around the room at a dozen senior captains and staff officers, some of whose expressions suggested they were not entirely convinced by her decision. A single captured scout ship might not, on its own, seem to warrant moving our entire border fleet into position. But consider the larger picture. For 6 years, the humans have kept a respectful distance from our territory, never testing our patience, never crossing our borders, except through approved diplomatic channels. Now, without warning, one of their captains flies directly into the heart of our space and allows herself to be captured without resistance. She paused, letting the words settle over the room. "I do not believe this was an accident, or a foolish mistake, by an inexperienced pilot. I believe this was a deliberate test, designed to measure our response, and if that is true, then our response matters a great deal. If we appear weak, uncertain, or slow to react, we invite further testing, further probing at our borders, until the humans grow bold enough to attempt something far more serious than a single scout ship. If, instead, we respond with clear, overwhelming strength, we remove any temptation for further testing, before it can even begin." One of the captains, a cautious older Threll named Uvrik Sent, raised a concern that had clearly been on his mind since the briefing began. "Admiral, with respect, is there not a risk that a show of force might provoke exactly the kind of escalation we hope to avoid? If the humans intended this as a test, perhaps the wisest response is a measured one, not a full deployment of our most powerful fleet." Threlkor considered the question seriously before answering, because she respected Sent's caution, even when she disagreed with it. "It is a fair concern, Captain Sent, and I do not dismiss it lightly, but I have studied human military doctrine as closely as anyone in this fleet, and if there is one thing that history teaches us about humanity, it is that they respect strength far more than caution. A measured, restrained response risks being read as hesitation, or worse, weakness. I would rather they see the full strength of the third battle fleet and think twice, than see a token response and wonder whether we could truly stop them if they pushed further." Sent did not look entirely convinced, but he offered no further objection, and the meeting moved on to logistics and formation planning for the deployment. Threlkor noted his hesitation privately, filing it away as the kind of caution she valued in her officers, even when it did not change her final decisions. The journey to the border took just under 6 hours at the fleet's cruising speed, and Threlkor spent much of that time in her private quarters, reviewing every piece of intelligence available on the human incursion, searching for anything that might explain the true purpose behind it. She found little that satisfied her. Captain Voss's file, transmitted from Yoltharak along with Malvorn's reports, described a career officer with an unremarkable service record. Nothing that marked her as particularly notable within the human fleet structure. No history of covert operations. No known ties to human intelligence services, at least none that Dominion analysts had been able to identify. On paper, Voss looked exactly like what she claimed to be, an ordinary scout pilot who had, for whatever reason, decided to cross a dangerous border alone. And yet Threlkor could not shake the feeling, reading through Malvorn's careful, cautious notes, that the border commander's instincts were worth taking seriously, even if she had already made her decision to deploy the fleet regardless. Malvorn was not a nervous officer prone to exaggeration. His record showed steady, reliable judgment over 3 decades of service. If a man like that felt something was deeply wrong about this incident, it was worth remembering, even while the fleet moved forward with its show of force. She made a private note to speak with Malvorn directly once the fleet arrived at the border, to hear his concerns firsthand rather than through the filtered language of an official report. It was a small gesture, but one that felt, to Threlkor, like the responsible thing to do for a commander who had trusted his instincts enough to put them in writing, even when he knew his superiors might not welcome the warning. She did not know, as she made that private note, that she would run out of time to keep it. By the time the third battle fleet arrived at Yoltharak Station and settled into its wide defensive formation around the border, the first quiet threads of Fleet Admiral Cole's true plan were already beginning to close around them, patient and unseen, exactly as they had been designed to do from the very beginning. By the second day, small things had started to go wrong aboard the Threll 3rd Battle Fleet, and nobody could explain why. It began with the sensors, a routine sweep of the outer system, the kind performed every 4 hours without fail, came back with a strange gap in the data. Nothing dramatic. Just a few seconds, here and there, where the long-range scanners on 3 different ships reported nothing at all, not even background static, before returning to normal as if nothing had happened. "Probably a solar flare," said the sensor officer aboard the destroyer Vantric Pride, a young Threll named Osa Farron, when her captain asked about it. "Or some kind of interference from the Nebula Cluster 2 systems over. Nothing to worry about." Her captain, a stern old Threll named Jeska Bront, was not so sure, but he had no evidence to point to anything else, so he let it go, and moved on to more pressing matters. By midday, the same kind of gap appeared on 4 more ships, then 6. Each time, it lasted only a few seconds. Each time, the crews found some reasonable explanation and moved on, because that was what disciplined crews did. They did not panic over a few seconds of sensor static. Admiral Threlkor heard about the pattern from Elth during her afternoon briefing and frowned at the report on her screen. "How many ships have reported this?" 9. "As of an hour ago, Admiral. All minor. A few seconds of sensor dropout, always in the long-range scanners, never the short-range or the weapons systems. Every ship that experienced it reports full functionality returning within moments." 9 ships is not nothing, Threlkor said. "Have engineering look into it." "Already done, Admiral. They report no fault in the equipment. Whatever is causing this, it isn't a hardware problem." Threlkor tapped her fingers against the edge of her command console, a habit she had picked up over the years whenever something bothered her without giving her a clear reason why. "Keep monitoring it. If it happens again, I want to know immediately." That evening, aboard Yultharak Station, Commander Malvorn found himself once again standing outside Captain Voss's holding cell, though this time he had not come to ask questions. He had come because he could not sleep, and some part of him believed, without being able to explain why, that the answers he needed were sitting calmly behind that transparent barrier. Voss looked up from where she sat on the narrow bench, her expression unreadable in the dim light of the cell. "Couldn't sleep either, Commander." "You seem very relaxed for a prisoner," Malvorn said. "I'm a patient person," Voss said. "It helps in my line of work." Malvorn studied her for a long moment. "There have been unusual sensor readings across the fleet today. Small gaps. Nothing serious, according to my engineers. But I don't believe in coincidence, Captain Voss, and I find it very strange that these gaps began appearing less than a day after your fleet arrived at this border." Something flickered behind Voss's calm expression, so brief Malvorn almost missed it. Not fear, something closer to quiet respect, the look of someone watching a puzzle come together faster than they had expected. "You're a careful man, Commander," she said. "I noticed that about you from the start. Answer my question." "I don't know anything about sensor gaps," Voss said, and there was something honest in the way she said it, though Malvorn suspected she was telling him a very narrow truth, one carefully chosen to avoid the larger question underneath it. "I've been sitting in this cell for over a day. I don't have access to any equipment. I couldn't cause a sensor problem even if I wanted to." "That is not what I asked." Voss met his eyes directly, and for the first time since her capture, her calm expression shifted into something almost gentle, almost sympathetic. "Commander Malvorn, I'm going to give you a piece of advice, and I want you to take it seriously, because I don't think you're a fool, and I'd rather not see you hurt by something you didn't have to be hurt by." Malvorn said nothing, waiting. "Whatever is happening out there," Voss said slowly, "it has very little to do with me. I'm just the part you can see. If I were you, I would be much less worried about the prisoner sitting quietly in your holding cell, and much more worried about the space around your fleet that you can't see into anymore." The words settled into Malvorn's chest like a stone dropping into still water. He wanted to press her further, to demand a clearer answer, but he could see in her face that she had said everything she intended to say. Whatever came next, Voss would let it happen on its own, without further warning from her. "Get some sleep, Commander," Voss said quietly, almost kindly, and lay back down on the narrow bench. closing her eyes as if the conversation had tired her more than she wanted to admit. Malvorn stood outside the cell for a long while after that, staring at nothing, before finally turning and walking back toward the command deck, Voss's words echoing in his mind. Much more worried about the space around your fleet that you can't see into anymore. The sensor gaps grew worse overnight. By the time the Threll crews woke for their next duty shift, what had been a handful of brief dropouts on a few ships had become a near-constant flicker across the entire fleet's long-range network. Ships would lose contact with their neighbors for 10, 20, even 30 seconds at a time, only to reconnect as if nothing had happened, with no record of any actual malfunction. "This isn't a hardware problem," said the fleet's chief engineering officer, a heavy-set Threll named Duvrik Kess, standing before Admiral Threllcore, with a datapad full of readings that told her nothing useful. "I've run full diagnostics on 6 different ships. Every system checks out perfect. It's like something out there is reaching into our sensors and turning them off, then turning them back on before we can trace it." "Something out there," Threllcore repeated. "You're suggesting an outside cause." "I don't know what else it could be, Admiral. I've never seen anything like this." Threllcore turned to Elth, standing nearby with his own set of reports. "Any sign of enemy vessels? Cloaked ships? Anything at all in the area that could explain this?" "Nothing, Admiral. Every scan we run comes back clean. Whatever is out there, if there is anything out there at all, it isn't showing up on any sensor we have." A cold, uneasy feeling settled over the command deck, one that Threllcore did not like at all. She had built her career on certainty, on knowing exactly where every enemy ship in a battle was, and exactly what it could do. This was different. This was an enemy, if it was an enemy at all, that could not be seen, could not be measured, and could not be fought, because there was nothing to aim at. "Pull the fleet into a tighter formation," Threllcore ordered. "I want every ship within visual range of at least 2 others at all times. No stragglers, no isolated patrols. If something is testing our sensors, I want us close enough together that we can respond instantly, together, the moment we find out what it is." "Yes, Admiral." As the order went out and 40 warships began drawing closer together across the dark space near the border, Threllcore allowed herself a private moment of doubt, standing alone at the edge of her command deck, staring out into the stars. Somewhere out there, something was watching her fleet, testing it, probing at its edges the way a predator might test the strength of prey before deciding whether to strike. She did not know what it was. She did not know what it wanted. And for the first time in 9 years of command, Grand Admiral Senna Threllcore found herself deeply, quietly afraid. 2 systems away, aboard the hidden command vessel where Fleet Admiral Renata Cole watched the same events unfold through channels no Threll sensor could detect, the mood was very different. "Their formation's tightening up," Rios reported, watching the Threll fleet's movements update on the display. "Just like the models predicted, they're pulling every ship in close, trying to protect each other from a threat they can't identify." "Which puts all 40 ships exactly where we need them," Cole said, studying the same display with quiet satisfaction. "Spread out, they'd be nearly impossible to deal with all at once. Clustered together like this, frightened and blind." She let the sentence trail off, unfinished, though everyone in the room understood exactly what she meant. "The probe drones are working better than we hoped," Patel added. "Microscale, nearly impossible to detect with conventional Threll sensors, and each one only needs a few seconds of contact to interfere with a ship's long-range array. We've got over 300 of them moving through their formation right now, completely unnoticed." "And the real work?" Cole asked. "On schedule," Patel said. "Systems are online, ready whenever you give the word." Cole nodded slowly, watching the little red markers that represented 40 Threll warships, drawn tightly together, unknowingly making themselves into the easiest possible target for exactly the kind of operation Cole had spent 3 years designing. She thought, briefly, of Elena Voss, still sitting patiently in a cell aboard Yultharak Station, playing her part with the same calm precision she brought to everything she did. "One more day," Cole said quietly. "Let them sit there a little longer, frightened of shadows. Let Admiral Threllcore believe she's protecting her fleet by pulling it together, and when the time comes..." She looked up at the room full of officers, all watching her with quiet, focused attention. "We'll show her exactly what she should have been afraid of all along." Outside, in the dark space between two systems, the trap that had been 3 years in the making drew one day closer to closing completely, and the largest fleet in Threll history sat huddled together in the dark, waiting for a danger it could not see, understand, or stop. Threllcore kept her promise to herself, though later than she had planned. Late on the second evening, with the fleet drawn into its tight defensive cluster and the strange sensor gaps still flickering through the formation, she opened a private channel to Yultharak Station and requested a direct conversation with Commander Malvorn. He appeared on her screen looking tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from too many sleepless nights, spent chasing a threat he could not quite name. "Admiral," he said, straightening despite his obvious fatigue. "I wasn't expecting a call from you directly." "I read your report," Threllcore said, without preamble, "the one you sent before I gave the order to move the fleet. I want to hear the rest of it, the parts that didn't make it into an official document." Malvorn hesitated only a moment before answering. "Admiral, I believe this entire incident, from the moment the Quiet Reach crossed our border, has been designed to draw a large, visible response from us. I do not know the full purpose behind it yet, but everything about Captain Voss's behavior, and everything I have learned about the ship itself, suggests a level of planning far beyond what a single scout mission would require." "You believe we are being led somewhere," Threllcore said. "I believe we already have been led somewhere, Admiral," Malvorn said carefully. "The fleet's current position, drawn tightly together at this border, in direct response to threats we cannot identify or locate. I do not know if that is a coincidence, but 30 years of service has taught me to be suspicious of outcomes that align this perfectly with what an enemy might want." Threllcore was quiet for a long moment, turning his words over in her mind. She thought of the sensor gaps, of the strange silence that had followed them, of the tight, vulnerable formation she had ordered her ships into out of caution, and wondered, for the first time with real unease, whether that very caution had played directly into some larger design. "What would you have me do differently, Commander?" she asked finally. "I cannot simply disperse the fleet on the strength of a feeling, not without concrete evidence of a specific threat." "I don't have an answer for that, Admiral," Malvorn admitted. "I only know that something about this does not sit right with me, and I would rather tell you that honestly than say nothing at all." Threllcore thanked him for his candor and ended the call, sitting alone afterward in the quiet of her command quarters, staring at the tactical display that showed her fleet, drawn tight and close, sitting exactly where an enemy might have wanted them all along. She gave orders to increase sensor sweeps and double the standing watch rotations, small precautions that felt, even as she issued them, hopelessly inadequate against a threat she still could not name. The next morning brought a different kind of trouble. A supply transport making its regular run between Yultharak and the nearer Dominion worlds failed to check in at its scheduled time. At first, nobody thought much of it. Transport ships missed check-ins occasionally, delayed by minor mechanical issues or simple scheduling errors. But when a full standard day passed with no contact and no response to repeated hails, Fleet Command grew concerned enough to dispatch a pair of fast scout ships to investigate. They found the transport drifting exactly on its expected course, engines cold, all systems apparently functional, with no sign of damage or struggle anywhere aboard. But when the scout crews boarded the vessel, they found it completely empty. No crew, no cargo, no sign of forced entry, or any struggle at all. It was as if every person and every object aboard had simply ceased to exist between one moment and the next. The report of the empty transport reached Threllcore within the hour, and for the first time since the whole incident began, she felt something colder than unease settle into her chest. Fear, real and undeniable, the kind she had not felt in decades of service. "Empty," she repeated, staring at Elth's report. "No struggle, no damage, just empty." "That is correct, Admiral. Whatever happened to that crew, it happened quickly, quietly, and without leaving any trace we can identify. Could this be connected to the sensor anomalies?" "I don't know how it could be, Admiral, but I also don't believe in coincidences any more than you do." Threllcore stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the tight formation of her fleet, 40 warships drawn close together, 60,000 crew members trusting her judgment to keep them safe. She thought of the missing transport crew, of Malvorn's warnings, of 2 days of strange, unexplainable events that seemed to circle closer and closer to her fleet with each passing hour. "Increase security protocols across every ship," she ordered. "I want internal patrols doubled. All non-essential personnel confined to secure areas during off-duty hours, and every airlock and docking bay monitored continuously. If something is moving through our formation undetected, I want us as prepared as we can possibly be when it finally reveals itself." The orders went out across the fleet within the hour, and for the rest of that second day, the mood aboard every Threll warship grew steadily darker. 60,000 crew members working their stations with the tense, watchful energy of people who knew, without being able to say exactly why, that something terrible was closing in around them. What none of them knew, and what none of the Dominion's sensors had been able to detect, was that the missing transport crew had not been harmed at all. They had been quietly and carefully removed by a small human infiltration team, transferred to a waiting vessel, and were, at that very moment, resting safely and comfortably aboard a human medical transport several systems away, confused and frightened, but entirely unharmed. It was a small, careful piece of Fleet Admiral Cole's much larger plan, one designed specifically to sow doubt and fear within the Threll fleet, without causing a single death, a demonstration of capability, meant to weigh on Threllcor's judgment just as heavily as the surrounding Armada eventually would. Cole had studied Threll psychology carefully in the years leading up to this operation, and she understood something that many human commanders before her had underestimated: fear of the unknown, carefully applied without any actual violence, could accomplish far more than open aggression ever could. A fleet frightened by shadows would make cautious, defensive choices. A fleet frightened by open attack would fight with everything it had. Cole wanted the former, not the latter, and every piece of her plan, from the sensor gaps to the missing transport crew, had been designed with that single goal in mind. By the third morning, with Threllcor's fleet drawn tight, exhausted, and thoroughly unnerved after 2 days of unexplainable events, the stage was finally set for the final piece of the plan to begin. 211 human warships, cloaked and silent, had spent the better part of 2 days quietly closing in around the Threll formation, moving with a patience and precision that came from years of preparation, waiting only for the signal that would bring the entire operation to its conclusion. That signal would come within hours, and when it did, Grand Admiral Senna Threllcor would finally understand exactly what kind of trap her fleet had walked into. 3 long days after a single human ship had first crossed the border, calm and unarmed, exactly as its captain had intended all along. The third day began quietly, and that quiet was the worst part of all. Aboard the Threlka's Glory, Admiral Senna Threllcor stood on her command deck watching 40 ships hold their tight defensive formation, engines idling, weapons ready, sensors straining against whatever unseen force had been probing at them for 2 full days. The sensor gaps had stopped entirely overnight, which should have brought relief. Instead, it brought a deeper unease, the kind of silence that comes just before something much louder. "Status," Threllcor said. "All ships holding formation, Admiral," Elth reported. "No further sensor anomalies detected in the last 6 hours. Whatever was probing us appears to have stopped." "Or it got what it needed," Threllcor said quietly, more to herself than to him. Elth did not have an answer for that, and Threllcor did not expect one. She looked out at the starfield, at the tight cluster of Threll warships glowing softly against the dark, and felt the old soldier's instinct in her gut telling her, quite clearly, that something was about to happen. She simply did not know what. She was about to find out. It started with the lights. Not the ship's internal lights, but something out in the void itself, a faint shimmer of distortion that swept across the edge of the fleet's formation, like ripples spreading across still water. Sensor officers across a dozen ships called out warnings at nearly the same moment, their voices overlapping into a wave of confusion that swept through the fleet's communication channels. "Admiral, we're picking up massive energy signatures, multiple points, all across our perimeter. Something's decloaking, I don't know what, it's everywhere. Admiral, weapons are locking onto us. I count, by the stars, I count over 200 separate targets." Threllcor's blood went cold as the tactical display in front of her filled, in the space of a few heartbeats, with red markers. Not 200 ships, she realized as the picture resolved, but something stranger and more unsettling. 200 human vessels, ranging from small strike craft to massive capital ships, arranged in a perfect ring, completely surrounding the Threll fleet's tight formation, every weapon aimed inward. They had been there the whole time, hidden, waiting, cloaked with technology so advanced that even a fleet on high alert, packed with every sensor system the Dominion possessed, had never seen them coming, not until the exact moment the humans chose to be seen. How? Threllcore started, and then stopped herself, because the how did not matter anymore. What mattered was that her entire fleet, 40 warships, over 60,000 Threll crew members, was now completely surrounded, outnumbered 5 to 1, with every weapon in human hands pointed directly at them. "Admiral!" Elth's voice cracked with alarm. "Incoming transmission. All channels. Human origin." "Put it through." The voice that came over the fleet-wide comm was calm, measured, and utterly chillingly reasonable. It was not Voss's voice. This was someone new, older, with the unmistakable weight of command behind every word. "Attention, Threll 3rd Battle Fleet. This is Fleet Admiral Renata Cole of the United Human Systems Navy. You are currently surrounded by 211 vessels of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Your weapons are locked by our targeting systems, and I promise you, our aim is considerably better than yours. I am giving you one chance, and one chance only, to stand down and power off your weapons systems. If you comply, no one has to die today." Across the Threll fleet, 60,000 crew members held their breath in the sudden, terrible silence that followed. On the Threlka's glory, Threllcore stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through every option available to her, and finding, to her growing horror, that there were none that ended well. 40 ships against 211. Even if her fleet was faster, even if her crews were braver, even if every single Threll gunner scored a perfect hit with their first shot, the math simply did not work. She would lose every ship under her command, and likely every life aboard them, before she inflicted anything close to equal damage in return. "Admiral, orders?" Elth's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Threllcore thought of Malvorn's reports, of Voss's calm surrender, of the sensor gaps that had crept through her fleet for 2 days, while she pulled her ships tighter and tighter together, unknowingly making them into the perfect target for exactly this kind of trap. She thought of her own decision, 3 days ago, to move the entire 3rd Battle Fleet to this border, in a show of strength, meant to intimidate a single captured pilot. She understood now, with the sick clarity of a soldier, realizing too late that she had walked directly into an enemy's plan. The single ship, the calm captain, the strange sensor gaps. Every piece of it had been designed, carefully, patiently, to draw the largest fleet the Dominion possessed into exactly this position, surrounded, outnumbered, and utterly without options. "Open a channel to Admiral Cole," Threllcore said quietly. A moment later, the human admiral's face appeared on the main screen, an older woman with sharp eyes and an expression that held no cruelty in it, only a calm, patient certainty that unsettled Threllcore more than open hostility ever could have. "Admiral Threllcore," Cole said, "I appreciate you taking the call." "You planned this," Threllcore said. "It was not a question." "We did," Cole admitted freely. "For 3 years, if you want the full truth of it, your 3rd Battle Fleet has been the largest single obstacle to lasting peace, along this border, for nearly a decade. Every time tensions rose, your government pointed to this fleet as proof that the Threll Dominion could defend itself against any human aggression. We decided it was time to demonstrate, clearly and without ambiguity, that this confidence was misplaced. Why not simply attack us and be done with it?" Threllcore asked, her voice hard, though beneath the anger was something closer to genuine confusion. "You have us surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered 5 to 1. If your goal was to destroy the 3rd Battle Fleet, you could have opened fire the moment you decloaked." "Because destroying you was never the goal, Admiral," Cole said, and for the first time, something like real weariness crossed her face. "We are not here to start a war. We are here to end the possibility of one before it begins. Killing 60,000 of your people would not bring peace. It would bring exactly the kind of hatred and revenge-seeking that starts wars that last for generations. That is not what humanity wants from this border, and I suspect, if you are honest with yourself, it is not truly what you want either." Threllcore said nothing, because she found, to her own surprise, that she did not entirely disagree. "Here is what I am offering you," Cole continued. Power down your weapons and your shields. Allow our boarding teams to disable your ship's offensive systems. Nothing more. No lives will be lost. No ship will be destroyed. In 3 days' time, once we are satisfied that the message has been properly received, your entire fleet will be released, fully intact, weapons restored, and free to return home. All I am asking, Admiral, is that you allow the Threll Dominion, and every government watching this border with interest, to understand very clearly what happened here today. And what is that? Threllcore asked quietly. That we could have destroyed your fleet, Cole said simply, and we chose not to. I think that message will do more for lasting peace than any battle ever could. Threllcore stood in the silence that followed, staring at the calm, patient face of the human admiral on her screen, and felt the full weight of the decision resting on her shoulders. Every instinct in her told her to fight, to die with her ship, rather than surrender it without a single shot fired. But she was not only a soldier, she was a commander, responsible for 60,000 lives, and she understood, with painful clarity, that fighting here would accomplish nothing, except their deaths. If I refuse? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Then we will disable your fleet by force, Cole said, without any satisfaction in her voice, only plain fact. We are fully capable of doing so, with minimal loss of life on your side, though I won't pretend there would be none at all. I would much rather you chose to stand down, Admiral. It would be better for everyone, including your own crews. Threllcore closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Malvorn's warnings, of Voss's calm certainty, of every piece of this trap that had been laid so carefully, so patiently, over years she had not even known to watch for. There was no path forward here that preserved her pride. There was only the choice between a fleet that survived humiliated and a fleet that died defiant. She opened her eyes and looked directly into the camera. Stand down, she said, her voice carrying across every ship in the 3rd Battle Fleet. All vessels, power down weapons and shields. Do not resist boarding. That is a direct order. Across 40 Threll warships, 60,000 crew members heard their admiral's voice, and, with heavy hearts, began to comply. On the human side, 211 vessels held perfectly steady in their surrounding ring, weapons still locked but silent, as the largest and most feared fleet in the Threll Dominion powered down, one ship at a time, and surrendered without a single shot ever being fired. Admiral Cole watched it happen with quiet satisfaction, and somewhere behind her on the command deck, a message came through from a small transport ship that had slipped quietly toward Yultharak Station during the chaos of the standoff. A message that brought the smallest, most genuine smile to her face all day. Package retrieved. Voss is safe and aboard, heading back to rendezvous now. 3 days, exactly as planned. And now, as the humiliated remains of the Threll 3rd Battle Fleet drifted silent and powerless in the dark, surrounded by a human armada they had never even known was there, the real work of Fleet Admiral Renata Cole's plan was only just beginning. Aboard the Threlka's Glory, the process of standing down took nearly 2 hours, ship by ship, as human boarding teams moved methodically through the Threll formation, disabling weapons systems while leaving life support, navigation, and every other essential function fully intact. Threllcore watched it happen from her command deck with a tight, controlled expression, refusing to let her crew see how deeply the humiliation cut at her. Elth stood beside her throughout the process, his own face carefully neutral, despite the obvious tension in his shoulders. Boarding teams report no resistance across the fleet, Admiral. Weapons systems disabled on 31 ships so far. No injuries reported on either side. Good, Threllcore said quietly. Make sure every captain understands that cooperation is expected. I will not have some overeager young officer deciding to make a heroic last stand and getting their crew killed for nothing. Understood, Admiral. The order has already gone out fleet-wide. As the human boarding teams worked, Threllcore found herself watching one in particular through the Threlka's Glory's own internal sensors, a small group of 6 soldiers moving through her ship's weapons control section, with quiet, practiced efficiency. They worked quickly, professionally, disabling targeting systems and power relays with a precision that suggested extensive planning, not improvisation. These were not soldiers stumbling through an unfamiliar ship. They moved like people who had studied Threll vessel schematics for years, who knew exactly where every critical system was located before they ever set foot aboard. It was, in its own strange way, almost more unsettling than the surrounding fleet itself. The 211 ships outside proved that humanity possessed overwhelming military strength. The calm, careful precision of the boarding teams proved something else entirely, that this operation had been planned in exhaustive detail, likely for years, against her fleet specifically, long before the Quiet Reach had ever crossed the border. "Admiral," Elth said quietly, watching the same feed she was. They knew exactly where to go. Every system, every access panel. It's like they've studied our ships as thoroughly as we've studied theirs. "More thoroughly, I suspect," Threlkor said. "We spent years assuming this fleet was untouchable. It seems the humans spent those same years learning precisely how to touch it." 2 hours into the boarding operation, a small human transport ship requested docking clearance with the Threlka's Glory itself, a request that struck Threlkor as strange until Elth explained its purpose. "It's Admiral Cole, ma'am. She's requesting to come aboard personally, to speak with you face to face before the fleet moves out." Threlkor considered refusing. Every instinct told her that allowing an enemy commander, however calm and however seemingly reasonable, to walk freely aboard her flagship was a risk she should not take. But she also understood, with the clear-eyed pragmatism that had guided her entire career, that refusing would accomplish nothing except delaying an inevitable conversation, and might even be read as fear by a woman who had already proven she held every advantage in this situation. "Grant the clearance," Threlkor said, "but I want a full honor guard present. If she's going to walk onto my ship, she'll see that Threll discipline hasn't broken, whatever else has happened today." Admiral Cole arrived 20 minutes later, escorted by only 2 of her own officers, and walked the length of the Threlka's Glory's main corridor, flanked by a full honor guard of Threll soldiers, standing rigid and silent at their posts, weapons holstered but present. If Cole found the display intimidating, she gave no sign of it, walking with the same calm, unhurried confidence that Threlkor had heard in her voice during the earlier broadcast. They met in Threlkor's private conference room, a small, spare space normally reserved for senior staff briefings. Cole took the offered seat without hesitation, folding her hands calmly on the table before her. "Thank you for allowing this visit, Admiral," Cole said. "I know it isn't an easy thing, letting an enemy commander walk your own decks after a day like today." "You are not my enemy, Admiral Cole," Threlkor said carefully. "Not yet, at least. Whether you remain something else depends a great deal on what happens from this point forward." Cole nodded slowly, seeming to accept the distinction. "That's fair. And it's part of why I wanted to speak with you directly, rather than let this entire encounter end with nothing more than a broadcast message and a fleet sailing home in silence. I want you to understand something clearly, Admiral, because I think it matters for whatever comes next between our peoples." "Go on." "This operation took years to plan," Cole said. "Years of careful study, patient positioning, and difficult decisions about exactly how far we were willing to go to make our point, without crossing into something neither of us could take back. I want you to know that at every stage of that planning, avoiding bloodshed was the single highest priority. Not because we are weak, and not because we fear the cost of a real conflict with the Dominion, because unnecessary death serves nobody, and because the kind of peace that lasts is built on respect, not on graves." Threlkor studied the human admiral's face for a long moment, searching for insincerity, and finding, to her quiet surprise, none that she could identify. "You could have destroyed this fleet," she said. "Utterly, completely, without ever giving us a chance to fight back properly. Why show restraint now, after going to such extraordinary lengths to put us in this position in the first place?" "Because putting you in this position was the entire point," Cole said simply. "Destroying you would have proven nothing, except that we were willing to kill. Any fleet with enough firepower can prove that. What we wanted to prove, Admiral, was something harder, and I think, ultimately more valuable, that we could have destroyed you, completely, and chose not to. That message will do more to keep this border peaceful for the next generation than any battle ever could, because it forces every leader who hears it to understand exactly what kind of restraint we are capable of, alongside exactly what kind of strength stands behind it." Threlkor sat with that for a long moment, thinking of Malvorn's warnings, of Voss's calm patience, of the careful, methodical boarding teams moving through her ships with such precise efficiency. Everything about this operation, from its very first moment 3 days ago, had been built with exactly this outcome in mind, and executed with a level of discipline and restraint that, however much it stung her pride, she found she could not honestly condemn. "You have made your point, Admiral Cole," she said finally. "I imagine my government will not be pleased, but I will make certain they understand exactly what happened here, and exactly why." "That's all I ask," Cole said, rising from her seat. "For what it's worth, Admiral Threlkor, I hold no ill will toward you or your crews. You made the choices any responsible commander would have made, given the information you had. That you chose to stand your people down, rather than risk their lives for pride alone, speaks well of your judgment, not poorly of it." Threlkor did not answer immediately, but as Cole turned to leave, escorted once more by her small honor guard, through the silent, watching ranks of Threll soldiers, the Grand Admiral found herself, despite everything, offering a small, formal nod of respect, one commander to another, across a divide that had, for the first time in 9 years, felt genuinely uncertain. By the time Cole's transport departed and the last of the boarding teams withdrew from the fleet, the sun over Threlka, 100 light-years away, had already set twice since the Quiet Reach first crossed the border. Word of what had happened would not reach the Dominion's High Council through official channels for several more hours yet, though the quiet space where the Third Battle Fleet should have been patrolling had already begun to draw worried questions from cargo captains and border traders passing through the region, questions that would soon grow into something the Dominion's government could no longer ignore. Word of the missing fleet reached the Threll capital of Threlka before any official report could be sent. It started as rumors among the traders and cargo haulers who traveled the border routes near Yultharak Station. Ships passing through the area reported an eerie emptiness where the Third Battle Fleet should have been patrolling. No warships, no patrols, no response to standard hailing frequencies. Just quiet, empty space where 40 of the Dominion's most powerful vessels had stood only days before. By the time the news reached the Dominion's High Council, the rumors had grown into something close to panic. Council members demanded answers. News feeds across a dozen worlds ran the same question over and over. Where was the Third Battle Fleet, and why had the government said nothing? The truth, when it finally came, was almost harder to believe than the rumors had been. Commander Malvorn stood on the bridge of Yultharak Station, staring at the same empty patch of space that had, 3 days ago, held the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. He had not slept properly since the moment the sensors on his own station had recorded the impossible. 211 human warships appearing from nowhere, surrounding the Third Battle Fleet, and then, less than an hour later, the entire formation, human and Threll alike, vanishing into some kind of coordinated faster-than-light jump that no Dominion sensor had been able to track. 40 warships, 60,000 souls, gone, in the space of a single hour, without a single shot fired. He thought often, in those long, sleepless hours, of Captain Elena Voss's calm voice, of the strange kindness in her final warning to him. "I would rather not see you hurt by something you didn't have to be hurt by." He understood now what she had meant, though understanding it did nothing to ease the weight sitting in his chest. Her cell, of course, had been found empty the morning after the fleet vanished, the door mechanism disabled with a precision that suggested help from the inside, or from technology far beyond anything the Dominion's engineers had ever seen. Voss had simply walked out, somewhere in the confusion, and disappeared just as completely as the fleet she had helped to trap. Malvorn did not blame her for it. In a strange way, he almost admired her. She had done exactly what she came to do, 3 days ago, when her ship first crossed the border alone. On the third evening after the fleet's disappearance, a single message arrived at the Threll High Council chambers on Threlka, broadcast on every major frequency at once, so that no government, no news network, and no ordinary citizen watching their screens could claim they had missed it. The face that appeared was Fleet Admiral Renata Cole, calm and composed, speaking directly to the camera, as if addressing old colleagues, rather than a frightened alien empire. "People of the Threll Dominion," she began. 3 days ago, your Third Battle Fleet, 40 warships strong, was surrounded and disarmed by a human force roughly 5 times its size. I want to be very clear about what happened and what did not happen. Every single Threll aboard that fleet is alive. Every ship remains intact. No weapon was fired. No life was lost. This was not an act of war. Across a dozen worlds, Billions of Threll watched in stunned silence as Cole continued. For years, your government has pointed to the Third Battle Fleet as proof that the Dominion could stand against any human threat along our shared border. We wanted you to understand, clearly and without room for doubt, exactly how easily that confidence could be tested, not to threaten you, not to conquer you, but so that every leader making decisions about this border in the future understands the true balance of strength between our peoples, and chooses their words and their actions with that understanding in mind. The screen shifted, showing a live feed of the Third Battle Fleet itself, 40 ships drifting quietly in open space, engines idling, weapons systems visibly restored and active once more. As the feed continued, the human warships that had surrounded them began, one by one, to power down their own weapons and pull back, opening a clear path toward Threll space. Your fleet is free to return home, fully armed and fully intact, exactly as promised. Cole's voice continued. We ask nothing in return, except that your government consider carefully what has happened here. Humanity does not want war with the Threll Dominion. We never have. But we will not stand quietly, while our territory is treated as something to be tested and probed by a fleet that believes itself untouchable. Let this be the last time such a test is necessary. The broadcast ended. For a long moment, the Threll High Council chamber sat in absolute silence, 60 council members staring at a blank screen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. 3 systems away, aboard the newly restored Threlka's Glory, Grand Admiral Senna Threlkor stood on her command deck and watched her fleet's sensors come back online, one system at a time, exactly as the humans had promised. Weapons, shields, engines, all fully restored, all fully functional, as if the humiliating 3 days of captivity had never happened at all. Except, of course, that it had, and every officer aboard every ship in the fleet would carry the memory of it for the rest of their careers. Admiral, Elf said quietly, standing beside her. All ships report full system restoration. We are free to move, on your order. Threlkor did not answer right away. She was looking out at the empty space around her fleet, at the place where 211 human warships had stood only hours before, vanished now, as completely and silently as they had first appeared. Set course for home, she said finally. Slow and steady. I want every crew member to have time to rest before we arrive. Yes, Admiral. As the fleet began its long, quiet journey back toward the heart of Threll space, Threlkor found herself thinking, not of anger or humiliation, but of something closer to grim respect. The humans had every opportunity to destroy her fleet, to kill 60,000 of her people, to claim a total victory that would have crippled the Dominion's military strength for a generation. They had chosen, instead, to prove a point and let everyone go home. It was not the action of an enemy seeking war. It was the action of a power secure enough in its own strength that it did not need to prove that strength through slaughter. She thought, too, of Commander Malvorn's reports from Yultharak Station, of the calm, quiet human captain who had started this entire chain of events simply by flying her ship across a border and waiting to see what would happen. Threlkor found herself wondering, with a strange mixture of unease and admiration, what kind of species built officers capable of that kind of patience, that kind of calm, that kind of quiet, unshakable confidence. A dangerous kind, she decided. A very dangerous kind indeed. In the weeks that followed, the story of the missing fleet spread far beyond Threll space, carried along trade routes and diplomatic channels to every corner of known space, where governments watched the balance of power between species with careful, calculating eyes. The details changed a little with each retelling, growing more dramatic with distance, but the core of it remained the same everywhere it was told. A single human ship had crossed into hostile territory alone, allowed herself to be captured without resistance, and within 3 days, an entire armada of 40 warships, the pride of an empire's military, had been surrounded, disarmed, and released again, without a single casualty, simply to prove a point. Some governments took the lesson as a warning and grew more cautious in their dealings along human borders. Others took it as proof that humanity, for all its careful words about peace, held a kind of quiet, patient danger beneath its calm surface, a willingness to plan for years and strike without warning when the moment was right. Still others whispered, in private council chambers and secure meeting rooms, that perhaps it was better, after everything, to never test that patience at all. On a quiet transport ship somewhere near the edge of human territory, Captain Elena Voss sat in a small cabin, reading through the same stories with a faint, private smile, watching how the tale had grown and changed as it traveled from world to world. She had done her part, small as it seemed at the time, sitting calmly in a cell for 3 days, offering nothing but quiet patience, while a much larger plan unfolded around her. Fleet Admiral Renata Cole found her there later that evening, bringing 2 cups of something warm, and sat down across from her without a word for a long moment, simply watching the stars pass by the viewport. "They're calling it the Yultharak incident," Cole said eventually, "already writing histories about it back home." "Did it work?" Voss asked. "The real question, I mean, not the fleet. The message." Cole considered the question carefully before answering. "I think so," she said. "I think, for a long while now, every government along our border is going to think twice before rattling a saber in our direction. And I think, more importantly, not one Thrall soldier died to teach them that lesson. That matters more to me than any tactical victory ever could." Voss nodded slowly, looking out at the same quiet stars, thinking of Commander Malvorn's tired, thoughtful face, of Admiral Threlkor's fleet sailing home fully intact, of 60,000 Threll crew members who would return to their families this week, instead of being memorialized in some cold official casualty list. 3 days, she said quietly. That's all it took. 3 days, Cole agreed, and about 3 years of planning behind them. But yes, 3 days was all the galaxy needed to see. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their slow, silent turning, indifferent to the empires and armadas that rose and fell beneath them, and somewhere far behind the small transport ship, an empire that had once believed itself untouchable, settled quietly into a new and uneasy respect for a species that had proven, without ever raising a single weapon in anger, exactly how much strength could be hidden behind a calm and patient smile. The story of the Yultharak incident would be told for generations, on both sides of the border, as the moment the galaxy first understood what humanity truly was capable of, when it chose patience over force, and precision over cruelty. And in quiet council chambers across a dozen worlds, in the years that followed, whenever some ambitious young officer suggested testing the human border once again, an older voice could always be counted on to remind them, softly but firmly, of exactly what had happened the last time somebody tried. Back at Yultharak Station, Commander Malvorn received a formal commendation from Fleet Command for his early warnings about the incident, a small consolation that did little to ease the weight he still carried from those 3 tense days. He read the commendation twice, then set it aside on his desk and returned to his duties, unable to shake the feeling that a warning heeded too late was hardly a warning at all. He requested, and was eventually granted, a transfer to Fleet Command's Intelligence Division, where his careful, cautious instincts would be put to better use, analyzing patterns and threats before they had the chance to unfold into full-blown crises. It was quieter work than commanding a border station, but Malvorn found he did not mind the change. He had seen, up close, exactly what could happen when the signs were there, and nobody in a position to act took them seriously enough. He intended to spend the rest of his career making sure that mistake was not repeated. Years later, when younger officers under his supervision would ask him about the Yultharak incident, hoping for some dramatic account of battle and heroism, Malvorn would simply shake his head and tell them the truth as he remembered it. That the entire event had been won and lost long before a single weapon was ever fired, decided instead by patience, careful planning, and the quiet confidence of a single human captain who had walked calmly into a cell and waited for history to catch up to her. On Threlka, the High Council debated for weeks over how to respond to what had happened, torn between factions that wanted to treat the incident as an act of aggression deserving retaliation, and others who argued, with growing support as the details became clearer, that the humans had shown remarkable restraint in a situation where total victory had been well within their grasp. In the end, cooler heads prevailed, guided in no small part by Grand Admiral Threlkor's own detailed report on the incident, which laid out honestly and without exaggeration exactly what had transpired, including her own private conversation with Admiral Cole aboard the Threlka's Glory. The Council ultimately chose to open new diplomatic talks with the human government, seeking clearer agreements about border conduct, and, quietly, a mutual understanding that neither side wished to see the kind of large-scale conflict that a different outcome to the Yultharak incident might easily have triggered. It was not peace exactly, not in the deep, comfortable sense the word usually implied, but it was something steadier than the uneasy standoff that had defined the border for the previous 6 years, built now on a foundation both sides understood clearly, that humanity possessed both the strength and the discipline to enforce its will along that border, and that it preferred, when given the choice, not to. Aboard her flagship, sailing the long, quiet patrol routes that had once again become the Third Battle Fleet's daily routine, Grand Admiral Threlkor found herself thinking often of that conversation in her private conference room, of Cole's calm, measured words about restraint and respect. She did not fully trust humanity, not after everything that had happened, and she suspected she never entirely would. But she found, much to her own surprise, that she no longer viewed them with the same simple fear and suspicion she once had. A dangerous species, she still believed, but not perhaps a cruel one, and in the delicate business of keeping two very different peoples from tearing each other apart across a shared and uneasy border, she had come to understand that the difference between those two things might matter more than anything else. Far from the border, in the quiet corridors of human space, Fleet Admiral Renata Cole retired from active command 2 years after the Yultharak incident, her long career closing on what many considered its finest achievement, an operation that had reshaped the balance of power along an entire border, without costing a single life on either side. She spent her remaining years teaching at a military academy, where she often told her students that the greatest victories were rarely the loudest ones, and that true strength was measured not by what a commander was willing to destroy, but by what they were willing, when the moment called for it, to spare. Captain Elena Voss continued flying for many more years after that, though never again on a mission quite so strange as the one that had made her, briefly and quietly, one of the most talked-about pilots along the entire human Threll border. She rarely spoke of the Yultharak incident in detail, preferring to let the official histories tell whatever version of the story they wished. But on the rare occasions when a young pilot, nervous before their first solo mission, asked her what it had been like, sitting alone in that cell for 3 long days, not knowing for certain how the plan would unfold, she always gave the same quiet answer. "I wasn't afraid," she would say. "I trusted the people behind me to do their part, the same way I did mine. That's really all any of it ever comes down to, in the end. Trusting the plan, and trusting the people who built it with you." And somewhere out along that quiet, uneasy border, where two very different peoples continued the slow, careful work of learning to live beside one another, without falling into war, the story of a single human ship that had crossed alone into hostile territory, and the entire Armada that had vanished 3 days later, without a single life lost, remained exactly what it had always been meant to be. Not a story about conquest or cruelty or the raw exercise of power, but a quiet, patient lesson about what strength truly looked like when it was wielded with discipline and with restraint by people who understood the difference between what they could do and what they should.